Good afternoon. Welcome to the first panel discussion in our new season of National Wi-Fi events. I'm Deanna Langoni, a program manager for the 210 Footwear Foundation. We're excited to be working with the Wi-Fi community to introduce a new grant program for women in the footwear industry seeking professional development opportunities. And all three events in this virtual event series will focus on the kinds of learning, networking, and professional development that can accelerate career advancement. Enjoy today's discussion and check your email later this week for more information about applying for a grant, nominating a colleague you think might be interested in a grant, or volunteering as a career coach for grant recipients. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to our first panel discussion in this year's 210 Wi-Fi event series. Our topic today is future-proofing yourself, upskilling and professional development. My name is Ashley Dyson, and I am the D&I manager at ASICS America Corporation. I have been with the organization for a little over 3 years, and I've been in the learning and development space for over 10. I'm so super excited today to introduce our panel today. So I will start our introductions with our lovely ladies on the panel. And Noni, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can. And thank you, Ashley. My name is Noni Boddie, and I'm here representing Foot Locker. I am Vice President of Human Resources for the field North America. I have been with Foot Locker for a little over a year and been in the HR space for over 20 years, and very, very delighted to be here with comrades in the space.
Thank you. Lyndsey?
Hi, my name is Lyndsey Benson. I am the VP of HR for Steve Madden. I have been with the company for 13 years now and been in HR for 20. And I'm very excited to be here with you all today.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, I would love to introduce Amy.
Thank you, Ashley. My name is Amy Hunter. I'm the Vice President of Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Caleres. I've been at Caleres for 2 years, but I've been in the DEI space for over 20 years. Glad to be here.
Amazing. Thank you all so much today again for taking the time out of your day to have this wonderful discussion with me. And I really want to just dive right on in. And we're going to start with our first question, which is pretty much, what are your thoughts about upskilling and professional development in general, especially in our space? And I would love to start off with whoever wants to volunteer first for this one.
Sure, I'll speak up. So I think that we have to stay current, and we want to be able to add value to our organizations. So staying current, I think, helps do that, and upskilling is a way in which we can stay current by learning new things, whether it's developing ourselves personally or learning new skills for the job, or something for the organization that will help us stay current so that we could add value.
I love that.
I like to think of upskilling as the get ready. So many times in my life, I've had an opportunity, and I'm really grateful for my mentors and coaches that told me what skills I might need for the next big and wonderful job that I was going to get. And so when I think about dreaming big and preparing for that moment, it's not just what am I doing right now, but a lot of it is what am I doing right now? And then what am I doing to add on to what I'm doing, really in anticipation of the next big job and job opportunity. So I think a lot of the upskilling conversation is rooted in being ready for the next opportunity that presents itself.
Awesome. Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, you all have said it all. And when you talk about upskilling, right, I think you can think about it from a couple different advantage points. Amy, you talked about getting ready for next, right? You talked about development in that space, Lyndsey, and I think it's really important, especially for those who perhaps you could be in a place of transition, or you could be in a place of your first managerial role, or perhaps you're moving into the executive ranks. And I think when you look at upskilling, you have to look at, what do I need to do to continue to build on the skills that I have? And what do I need to do to upskill, right? So upskill could be a combination of those things. I think development is very critical, whatever space, whatever level, whatever stage in your career that you find yourself in, you have to be very intentional and deliberate. And oh, by the way, I think you have to own it. It's yours to own.
I truly believe that in owning your own career and talking about upskilling, because I would honestly say in my career, I've been in the learning and development space for a really long time, but I've also had positions where I've sat on boards and committees for diversity and inclusion with different organizations and jobs that I've had. And then when the opportunity to be D&I manager at my own current company, it made sense because I had already started doing what it took to upskill myself, putting myself in those positions to get that practice and the awareness. And then also I ended up going to get a certification to help support that. So I now have a diversity and inclusion certification to be able to add to my skills and talents to where I am today. So I found that, to Amy's point, I was getting myself ready for the next big and wonderful without necessarily knowing that I was doing it, but knowing what I had passions for. And so when I think about that in my career, that was a way of how I continued to stay current. But have there been times in your own careers where you've had to figure out how to stay current and upskill yourself for the next big and wonderful?
And everyone said amen. Yes. You know, and you know, when you're joined in good company, you know, with professionals who have been in a space for any number of years, right? You find yourself in that space, right? If you haven't found yourself in that space, you have to ask yourself, why not, right? You will find yourself in a position where even in the thing that you're an expert at is changing, it's evolving. You know, speaking just to HR, I can remember dating myself a little bit. So I'll just say 10 years, but maybe it was 15 years ago. You know, we didn't really talk about COEs. Remember, an HR person was, they did everything else in the company that didn't have a title, right? Throw it over to HR and they do it. And we evolved very nicely into specialty areas. And I would say that was a pivotal point in my career as an HR professional, where you honed in on that area of expertise. All areas in HR are not COEs, but you honed in on it to say, okay, do I want to be in benefits? Do I want to be in compensation? We all knew a little bit to be dangerous, right? What do I do to become more strategic, right? The DE&I space, while beloved, right, is fairly new to the world of HR in terms of being a COE, not strange to us, right? But in terms of being set apart and by itself as it should be. But we all have to hone in on those skills at some point. I would say it's not different in any other space, any other area. If you're in retail, you have to say to yourself, where do I fit in this space, right? You may start off in sales, but then where do you evolve to? And how do you get that training? I would also add that it's not always a certificate, right? Who are you looking to get the next level of development? Who is already doing it well?
I love that. Amy, do you have anything to add into regards to how do you find yourself continuing to upskill?
Yeah, maybe it's because I'm a middle child, you know, like I had to figure out real early, like what was my niche going to be, right? My sister had, you know, a lot. She was the firstborn. And so I think work is very similar to that. You know, I think I've been doing diversity work most of my career. And I remember thinking, like, what's going to set me apart from the other people who either are interested in this or who are doing this same work? And so for me, it was a lot of scholarship. I read a lot of books, and I love Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, because when I think about how many hours it actually takes to be a subject matter expert, you know, it's more than a year, it's more than 2 years, right? And so I think also being patient, but counting those hours and getting published, you know, it's the who else would say you're good at this job, not just you saying it, right? Because my driver's license is 120. So yeah, I use it a lot. So, not just what we want it to be, right? But is it true? Is it accurate, right? Would somebody else be like, oh yeah, of course it's 120, Amy, you look about 120. Nobody would say that, right? And so when it comes to your professional work, I think that becomes a place of, you know, you're a subject matter expert, or you're a professional, or you're well-respected according to whom? are you published? Do you present? Do you have the business acumen or the credentials that go behind that? And sometimes even the street credibility that goes with that, right? So what would your coworkers say, not just at your current employer, but the one that you left as well. So I think all of that plays into getting ready and being ready, and having some champions, as tailwinds instead of headwinds.
I love that. And then Lyndsey, what are your thoughts about how you continue to upskill yourself and get yourself ready for the next?
So, I subscribe to many different email groups and things like that, but it's a crazy day, most days for me. So my big thing has been podcasts lately, because during the time I commute, I could just listen to a podcast. And I find that very beneficial because you can listen to podcasts on any subject. I think Noni said it, talking to people in the organization or even outside of the organization. I'm a member of the HR 210 Executive Leadership Committee, and we meet and we just all talk about things. And that in itself, I learn more from that group of individuals than I could, sometimes reading any book. And just speaking to people within my organization as well, who are experts or subject matter experts in certain areas. And continuing to have those conversations has definitely helped me stay current and learn new things.
Yes, I can definitely say like mentorship, and I won't go down that road of mentorship, sponsorship, and all of that wonderful jazz. But having mentors, I think too, is a great way to help understand your gaps, as well as where you are doing great. I can definitely say, thanks to this wonderful group, I've met someone as awesome as Amy, and she has been an indirect mentor. I'm not sure if she knows, but thank you. To just the growing work that I'm trying to do within my own organization. So it's being able to pick up on those things and connecting with people who are, to your point, Lyndsey, subject matter experts, because Amy is a wheelhouse of knowledge, and just being able to pull on that, but then outside of that, identifying those gaps and being able to fill them with the necessary knowledge to continue to move on. And so when we talk about, skill gaps, as talent management leaders, do you see skill gaps as an issue for your company or the workforce industry as a whole? And if so, which skills do you feel are most needed specifically for our footwear industry?
I'm going to go first on this one. I think a lot of things. I'm in the ending part of my career now. And I think, really thinking as women, how can we support each other better? And I'm not sure we get like socially acculturated to do that all the time. But when I think about the power of women, like we are smart, we are organized, we are thoughtful, strategic, like that is just part of who we are. I think one of the skills that I hope that we are all working on, certainly I'm always working on, is making sure that we're supporting each other in the most authentic ways, right? Not just like the critique and criticism that fashion sometimes yields you, but like, hey, that email, it needed to be a little longer. You needed to soften it up in the beginning part, or you needed to explain more, or sometimes even just inviting a voice into the conversation, like being not just a good listener, but being an intentional leader. And like, how do we do that? Like, how would we show up in everyday life, making sure that we're always supporting the next wave, the next generation, and not with a scarcity model, but like in the world of there's more than enough for all of us, all the room at the table, and just making sure that we're being thoughtful about making sure that's true for women too, and women of color specifically as well.
I love that. Just being able to support each other, I think as a whole is a necessary skill, because you tend to find that few and far between. The more you start to move up, you start to really need those allies in those spaces. And I would love to direct the question to Noni. Do you have any insights on some of the skill gaps that you currently see, or how you feel, which skills you feel are most needed?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Amy, when you talk about the, being authentic. But I would also add to that, and I don't know that you necessarily call this a skill, but I think because women traditionally haven't been in the ranks that they're in, these are gaps that you see. And so may not be identified as a skill gap in the workplace, right? I could certainly say need time management and prioritization and, things like that. We tend to come a little bit more buttoned up because we have such strong expectations of ourselves, having been, building the family, taking care of the children and all the traditional things that go with it. However, I think what is missing is we don't necessarily know ourselves in these ranks in the workplace, right? And so not only do we need to show up as our authentic self, I would add to that, Amy, we need to allow our female counterparts to show up as their authentic self, right? So we want to, but we need to allow them. And so what does that look like? That looks like everything else you said, Amy, being able to collaborate in a very candid, transparent, honest way, in a safe way. What we see in social media is fixing someone else's crown in private, right? One might say, but I think it's very important because this is how we support one another, and we need to do that much better. We talked a little earlier in another conversation about how our male counterparts show up very differently in the same spaces. It's not wrong, it's just what they do. And so we need to give ourselves permission. We need to give our female counterparts permission, but we need to be authentic, transparent, and true about it.
I would agree. And Lyndsey?
They said it all. I mean, they really, I don't have much to add because they did say it all. If I think about it, communication, I see especially with the younger generation, they text and like they don't pick up the phone. And, or they're sitting in a meeting and they're like, texting, and I'm like, wait, are you looking at me? Are we talking? So, I would say there is a little bit of skills gap with some basic communication skills, like how to pick up the phone, how to have a conversation in person, because we rely on the phone and texting and all of that. And sometimes a good old phone call or a face-to-face meeting can go a long way.
Understood. I would certainly agree with that. And so when we talk about those actual skill gaps, such as communication, for example, do any of your companies manage the need for specific skills, whether it's communication and providing some type of educational course or type of workshop or anything to help to fill in those gaps? Or do you prefer to hire new talent to pull that in, or even just upskill your current employees? What are people typically looking for? Are we filling in the gaps, or are we looking outside?
Wow, I think that's such a loaded question, right? It having been at Foot Locker for only a year, right? Or a little over a year, or I've been told I can't say I'm new, so a little over a year. I would say been duly impressed, right? From an L&D perspective, not just learning, right? We make it a priority. Learning is a priority, but how? Everyone learns very differently. And I think we've often talked about adult learning and types of learning. I think it's more critical now than ever because, we have multiple generations in the workplace at one time for the first time. And, they all learn very differently. So we have methods internally with very strong L&D team who curate the curriculums that we need that speak to the skill gaps that we identify, whether it's upon hiring or at certain levels within the organization or within certain areas of the business. Now, with that said, I think that, any good organization needs to also identify, perhaps even in a good hire, what are those gaps? And so we do assess on hire as well to say, okay, they excel on the leadership side, but maybe they need more opportunity on the time management side. And then we hone in on how to close those gaps by way of our development processes or by way of the personal development that may be afforded by their direct leader, within wherever they report. So yes, it is definitely a high priority. Learning is important. When you're talking about the sales force, everything's dictated by the consumer, right? So you have to stay fresh. And you have to know how the times are changing. And we know that they've changed very, very drastically since COVID. So we're very intentional about honing in on skill gaps, first identifying them, honing in on them, and then affording opportunity for learning internally and externally.
I love that, because at my organization, for example, we do career development plans. And so people create this outline of where they see their career, where they've identified their own personal gaps, what they feel they may need to get to the next level. And for example, some people may say it's additional schooling. So some people may say it's a workshop or things like that. So as organizations, are any of your brands offering any types of ways to upskill outside of, the traditional L&D space within the business?
So pretty excited. This year we rolled out tuition reimbursement, which we've always had at Caleres. So historically, you've gone to school, you pay for it, and then we reimburse you on your paycheck after the course is over. We actually reverse engineered that this year. This semester is our first semester doing that. So you actually enroll in school, make me a payee, and I pay your tuition full for the entire semester. When you graduate, we have a party and we give you gifts and things like that. But it really was a game changer for people who couldn't afford to pay for it up front, which was one of those equity issues, right? Of like, why aren't people getting promoted? Why aren't they moving up in their careers? It was really clear when we looked at kind of the historical data that people needed some additional skills. And so that covers certifications, your undergrad, your graduate degree. It also covers the retail side of the business for our associates as long as you're full-time. And it's been really cool. And a good year we had, I think, 12 people in a year. We are up to 116 people in this semester. And we're super excited, a little bigger than we thought it was going to be, but that's okay. But when we think about like, what is an HR professional who wants to take SHRM? How do you do that? So I think we have 26 people here at Caleres who are all taking the SHRM certification at the same time. The camaraderie, the friendship that builds, even, oh my goodness, can you believe that chapter conversation it builds within the workplace? I can't replace that with something else, right? And there's no other way to say we care other than to show we care. And so this, hats off to Diane Sullivan and my boss, Doug Koch, for saying yes and go ahead. Jay Schmidt's 100% behind this as well. But it was, we kind of said this is maybe why people aren't doing this, and created a way for people to get there quicker and faster. And I think people are so interested in not just what they're doing today, but we have people in our manufacturing center who are taking IT classes because they want to work for the IT department. So that is, when I think of like moments of joy, like that is such a moment of joy. And I get to do it, and I get, that's part of the work, and that's pretty cool.
Love those wins. I think that those are essential, especially when the business sees the importance and the value of investing back in their employees with something as thoughtful as, why isn't the tuition reimbursement program working? Where's the break? Because this is essentially free money. So why do we not have people accessing such a benefit? And to dive deep and figure out the whys, I think that was truly essential to the success that it starts to see, that I'm seeing with your program. So congratulations on that. Lyndsey, I do want to give you an opportunity to answer the question as well.
Sure, I think there was like 3 questions in that, but I think so we offer basic Microsoft training across the board. We have Excel classes. For a while, we were doing them on site, and then COVID happened, so we were doing them, just virtually. And we offer tuition reimbursement as well. And this year, for the first time, the whole paying for tuition came up as well for us. And someone who really wanted to take something was petrified to even ask. I feel like terrible. And they came and we allowed it. And so now we're going to look into doing, Amy, what you're doing, because it's great. I mean, it's so great what you're doing. We also are looking into doing some management training. There was a core group of us who did a pilot program with 2 different leadership development courses, and we hopefully plan to roll that out as well. So it's important. And I think it's important to upskill your current employees, but I do think it's important to hire outside sometimes as well. I love, a new fresh set of eyes on things sometimes, or a new perspective on things as well. And I think, I think there's, you should do both.
I agree. And when we look at, talent, I think, and to you all's point during this conversation, we've talked about how when you're thinking about upskilling yourself in your career, you're the driver of all of this. You are the driver to your next destination, to the next big and wonderful. And so that makes me think about what is a great way for people to just kind of assess their own skills and strengths. How do you go about doing that so that you can get ready for the next thing? Should people follow a formal career path, or are there certain discussions that should be had? Just what are your thoughts around how people should assess their skills and strengths to get them to the next thing?
I think you should just make it up. I mean, there are jobs that exist now that didn't exist 5 years ago. So just make up the job that you want, sell it to your boss, and go forward. I mean, just make it up. You found a lane. Convince us.
Charting your own path. No, that's true.
I've done it. I've done it. I went online and I looked up every job description for what I wanted to be doing in HR. And I pulled a little from here and a little from there. And I wrote my own job description. And then I looked and I said, all right, this is what I want to be doing. And this is where I am. And what do I need to get there? And I said, all right, I should probably learn a little bit more about this, a little bit more about that. And I went in and I asked for it. And I got it. But I had to invest in myself, and I had to take the time to do that. Right. I had to say, this is important to me, and I'm going to make this a priority, and I'm going to write this down. And it wasn't just like what I want to be doing. It's what do I need to do as well to get there. That was part of the plan. It's not just, okay, this is what I want to do. I wrote specifics, like I'm going to take this course. I'm going to speak to this person. I'm going to listen to this podcast. And these are the things I'm going to do to get to that role.
I love that. Noni, any thoughts?
Chart your own course. I mean, Lyndsey said it is exactly that, right? There may be some making up of going along the way, but I will tell you what absolutely must exist is the courage, the confidence, and the belief in your own self, right? Because you have to be able to sell it, right, Amy? Even whether it's made up or not, you have to be able to sell it. You have to be able to negotiate, if you will. Why should this be important to the company? And why, in fact, is it important to you? And what is the ROI, right? The ROI is to be able to say, I am an expert, or I am, in progress of becoming an expert, right? Lyndsey, as you go out and you get that training to better yourself in that space. But I think you have to absolutely chart your own course. You are not going to sit in a development conversation, even with the best leader, and be told what your next is. I mean, one might say a promotion is that, but even in that, it's not. You have to own it. You have to be fully invested in what is next for you. Or as I say it, and ladies, we talked about this, right? When you grow up, right? We're never fully grown up. There's always something next. But I think that's critical. You must own it.
I agree.
I think what's so important in what you just said, though, Noni, is the courage, right? Like, think how many times you had to raise your hand when you weren't quite sure, and like all the benefit that pays off. Lyndsey, of like taking the risk and like creating something she wanted to see, and like also the courage to like own what you need in order to be ready. I think that's all part of that upskilling conversation. But I think about like the wins, so many times it was raising my hand when I wasn't sure and doing it anyway,
I mean, now I know this is not a question, Ashley, but I mean, you can't like roll off of the topic there because we're talking about women, right? And I think so often what we do is we say, I want to do that. I think I want to do that. I think I'm interested in that. And then in the very same breath, we say, I'm not qualified to do that. In the very same breath, right? And so, yes, absolutely the courage, but you won't have it if you also don't broker the relationships, We won't say mentor sponsorship, right? But if you don't broker the relationships to have those people around you who can encourage you in that path. If you chart your own course, you made that up. It was important to you. There is a reason why you had this aspect or component in, but you didn't have this one, and so you have to give yourself credit for those things. I think that goes back to the first question, which was about being authentic and then allowing each other to truly be authentic. I mean, kudos, Lyndsey. You went out on the internet, you looked at it, you said, okay, I want to do this, I don't want to do that. I'm going to create my own job description. And then to walk in the door. I mean, as leaders, it's really hard to say that to someone who's charted their own course, given it thought, and the courage to sit down and tell you, and can you find room for me? And oh, by the way, this is what I think the compensation should be for that, right? I mean, as leaders, we have to, you gotta pause and give them a little bit of credit, right? But I do think that that's incredibly important. And as women, we do not do that.
Yeah, we talk about having the courage and confidence for the ask and being able to go to leadership to have those questions. I know I've done that in my own career a time or two where I was in a role and I saw that going to the next level would help equip me with the necessary skills for the bigger opportunity. And so I literally went to my leader and said, if this is what I want to do to be ready, what does that look like outside of what I'm currently doing? What skills do I need to gain? What do I need to go partner with someone in another department? Do I need to be able to have face-to-faces with different individuals? Do I need to go outside of the organization to get some skills to come back in? But I had to have, to you all's point, that courage and confidence to have that conversation. So I know what it took for me, which was definitely the courage, but it also took knowing that I didn't know certain things and how do I get that to get there. So that was me having my serious conversation, but sitting in your roles today, and if a woman was to come up and say, I want to have a serious conversation about my professional development with my own leader, where do I start? How do we help equip someone with the tools for that conversation?
Well, I think they have to start with themselves. I mean, we've said it time and time again here, right? You can't walk into the conversation expecting that leader to tell you, right? So what does it look like? I think, Lyndsey, you illustrated it well, right? You sat down, you gave it thought, you know what you didn't want to do, right? So depending on where you are in the trajectory of your career, you at least know what you don't want to do. The longer you work, you know more what you want to do, right? But you create that plan and you walk in for partnership. That's essentially what you're looking for. What does it look like though? It looks like knowing yourself. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? Being honest and authentic about what are your gaps and how do you plan on, correcting those gaps and upskilling, if you will. What is your plan? And if you need help in doing that, how do you ask for the tuition reimbursement? How do you ask for it? You ask for it. That's how you ask for it, right? How do you ask for an opportunity to be an intern? We have internship programs at Foot Locker. You can go from the store, you can go to court, but it's one thing to have it offered. It's another thing for you to say, okay, I want to come off of the retail floor. I would like to move into HR. I want to move into the specific place in HR. How do I do it? So again, I think it goes back to charting your own course. And knowing what it is that you want and having the courage to articulate it. As leaders, we have to create the platform and the safety for our team members to be able to do that.
I love that. Lyndsey, do you have any thoughts? I saw your brain turning over there.
No, when Noni said, as leaders, we have to create the space to do that, it just like hit a chord with me, because if we don't create a space for people to feel comfortable, they're not, and so I try to lead that way. And I try to, if you want, yes, you need time for this, of course, and I think it's so important, because then I hope if I'm leading that way, then they're going to take that and they're going to lead that way. And we can create this environment where it's okay to ask for these things. So it just, you said that and it hit.
Amy?
Yeah, when Noni said the courage, I was like, you know what? Sometimes we have to break up with all right, like any other relationship. Sometimes our work relationship, we have to break up with this is just an all right job. And I know I'm saying that and I understand like all of the weight that carries. Because if you're breaking up with all right, because all right is what you know, then that means that you have to go into a place that you don't know. And I think as women, one of the ways that we look for support is in that scary space of like, I'm going somewhere that I don't know. Maybe I don't know the industry. When I think about retail, there's still a lot of men, in positions of power in retail. So when I think about like, this is more than just buying stuff, right? This is knowing how to get those shoes off the water, right? It was my logistics person, right? And before I came to Caleres, I didn't even know there were things on the water, like barges were really used in real life, right? I came from a whole nother industry where there were no barges. And so, part of the breaking up part is the fun part of starting something different, wildly unique and, exciting all at the same time. And I would just encourage us to like, notice the places where we've settled, because often when we're selling, we're not really that happy. We're not excited about the work that we do. I can hear the enthusiasm in all of the panelists' voice about how excited they are about the work that they're currently doing. So sometimes you have to break up and leave, not necessarily leave the company, but leave that job and do something radically different. And, I would say that, as a person who's broken up, in a relationship and with a company, it was well worth the breakup and I'm way happier, right? And so the goal here is to live our best lives. And so I would just encourage in places where we get stuck or scared to remember there are people always around you to help you.
Ashley, Amy was what you're talking about. You're talking about, the breaking up with what's not for you. And, I'm shameful to admit, right? It took way too many years for me to understand that the interview goes both ways, or to understand that, I need to sit back and think about what kind of culture do I want to work in, right? What does it look like, so that when it doesn't look like that, I can say no early before I have to break up. We don't even have to get into the relationship, right? But it took way too many years to learn that, until I was in a culture that I said, this is absolutely not for me. But I almost thought that it meant my career wasn't for me, until I had good leaders and partners around me who said, what are you doing? You have to stay in this space. It was the culture that I was in that was making me have second thoughts about a career that was 20 years old, right? That is not what we're talking about, right? But then, I'm thankful for good leaders. I have experienced good leaders here at Foot Locker. And when you talk about safe places, it's interesting. I said a little over a year. It was so encouraging. It was so liberating is the word I'm looking for, to have leaders say shortly after being enrolled, what do you want to do next? I mean, just imagine that a leader would ask you that, 10 years ago, 15 years, the common theme was, you've only been here 6 months. You've only been enrolled for 6 months. You've been with the company 10 years. You've only been in this role for 6 months. How dare you talk about next, right? So I would say, here, just kind of dovetailing off of what's already been said, give yourself permission to interview whatever's in front of you, whether it's the next relationship leader that you're going to engage in. Some, statistics tell us they leave the leader. That's a breakup, right? But why? What kind of leader are you looking for next? Because that was what I was looking for, leadership, certain type of leadership. And then it landed me into a company with a very good culture. But it took way too long to learn that. I would love for, leaders and upcoming leaders to understand the value of that.
I think you even spoke to something that I think is very true. It's when you as a leader are supportive and encouraging, and you can help people understand what gaps they may have that need to be filled in, and supporting them in that. I think that, to your point, people don't necessarily leave. But do you think that there is still a mindset of leaders who feel like if they develop their employees, that they're going to take all of their wonderful new skills and move on elsewhere? Do you think that that's still a mindset? And if so, is it a safe mindset to have?
I mean, I think I judge my leadership by the amount of leaders that I create or make or support, right? Like I don't expect anybody to work with me or for me forever. Like if that's where we are, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And so I think, look, the world is a big place. And I think, leaders that I respect have made other really good leaders. And so this isn't about losing someone. I'm still in connection with a lot of the people, this is about making the world a better place and being part of that, being a catalyst for that change. And so I think, we can't be so afraid that we can't find another brilliant human being to, offer another leadership opportunity to. I think I'm probably more excited about the next person I meet, right? Like, this is the next person, it's going to be a great leader, right? I get to be with them first, right? I get to meet them before they get their next big job. And, what a gift that is. What a gift that is. We give our lives away.
Yeah, truly. Any other thoughts on that? Because to your point, Amy, I absolutely agree.
It kind of takes me back to years ago. I was working in a different industry, and the leaders were really having a hard time with the workforce that was being promoted, but they were going into other departments within the company. And I recently had this conversation. I said, that's not attrition, right? Like that's growth, that's promotion. And I think you're right, Amy. Like that's what we're here for, to develop the next. You don't know, you could be the next Bill Gates, right? And just to have a piece in that. I always say, as a servant leader, right? I'm here to provide leadership, but you are your own leader, and that's why you're here, and that's why you're on the team. And I think that we have to condition other leaders and the leaders that we support to understand that it's a great value. It is a great value. Folks move on, they move up, they move over. Progress in this generation is not just about promotion. Statistically, they have said they want to grow. They don't necessarily have to go to the next level. For some, it means that. For others, it means growth. And growth means I'm going to change fields. And so I decided to stay in it for 20 years, but I'm thinking this next generation is teaching me something. Why can't you go be something great and recreate yourself after 20, 25 years? Because you can. We just thought it was barbaric when we were coming up. So yes, build. Build your legacy. Build your legacy.
I can definitely say I'm in a place of growth. I've had conversations where I'm like, I'm not looking to change my title. I'm not necessarily saying I want to be a director tomorrow, but what I am saying is I want to grow in my space and not just be the best subject matter expert that I can be, but I want to be the most well-rounded employee that I can for the business as well as for myself. I want to put as many tools in my toolbox as I can so that I can be a great resource to those around me. And I think that there's true value in, to your point, just growing. Not necessarily looking for the next title change. So I'm not necessarily looking to leave the company, but I am just looking to be able to grow. And I feel like if I'm growing and I can share that knowledge, I definitely want to be able to plant that seed to help the next person grow as well. And so it's just that cycle of being able to help the next, to your point, Amy, like I get the excitement in seeing someone else be just as great. And it's like, if you can bring all that greatness here, amazing. But we want amazing humans in the world. So if that means that you can't stay here, I'm glad that I had a helpful hand in seeing you on to the next opportunity, because I can assure you that that impact will definitely go on to the next. And so when we think about just training and development and growing individuals, what do you think are the biggest issues companies face when it comes to training and development as it stands right now?
I'll start with this one. I think that, we're all so busy with our day-to-day job responsibilities. And what do you mean I'm gonna, I have to let someone, go to a conference for 2 days, or they're gonna take a course and they're gonna have to leave early? Yes, it's okay. I think that's what it is. It's we're not thinking big picture. We're just thinking, oh, how can we let them go? Who's going to do the work? The emails are going to build up. And even on our cell, I know myself, I'm like, That means my email, I'll have 500 emails when I get back. But that's thinking, that's thinking small. If we want to think big picture, we have to allow ourselves the time and allow others the time to upskill and develop themselves. And we have to model that behavior, right? So I have to show my team, I am going to take a professional development, or I am going to listen to this seminar, or I am going to do this. I'm doing this. So it's okay if you do this. The work will still be there and we'll get to it. It'll get done. So I think that's probably, for us, something that comes up often.
I can definitely see time being an issue, but to your point as a leader, if you're modeling the behavior, then that gives people the permission in their minds to know, if my leader's doing it, I can do it too. And so if they see you make time and make the sacrifice, then I think that also helps to let people know it's okay to do the same. And guess what? Even if your leader doesn't do it, it's still okay to develop yourself.
Exactly.
I think that's the other part of it too, is don't be afraid, to you all's point, courage, to step out there and develop yourself. Sometimes that may come at a sacrifice. Maybe that means you're not binge watching TV on the weekend. Maybe that means that you're going out there and developing yourself or doing what it takes to get to the next spot. But we have to understand that sometimes it takes going out there, the sacrifice, or dedicating the time, however that may see fit, having the conversation about time to be able to get that done. So to your point, Lyndsey, I think that time is definitely one of those things that could potentially look like a hurdle, but it should definitely be something that we move out the way.
Yeah, we talk about something here, and kudos to my chief HRO who talks about box 2 a lot. Like, is it necessary? Do you need to be there? And we have to think about that. We've not been necessarily trained to think about how we are using our time. We talk about time management, but really thinking about how you use your time. And so, there is permission where I am to say, I will not be in attendance at that meeting. We've been given that permission to be able to say that. Now, you do it the right way. You delegate accordingly, which creates opportunity for other people on your team, and et cetera, et cetera. But, you can't be in this space of thinking that you're always going to miss out. You have to make sacrifices in the seasons in which you're investing in yourself. And, and it could be anything. It could be the stage of the educational phase that you find yourself in. It could be in the parental stage that you find yourself in. My daughter was in competition cheer. Okay, so anyone who's done that, right? And then of course there was AAU basketball. And I said, I'm just not going to let these seasons come up and surprise me every time. I know when they're going to come, like Christmas, when they're coming. So you prepare your team and you be more transparent in that space. But I'm fortunate to work under leadership that does give you permission to really analyze where is the best and highest use of my time. And I do the same with my team because I have been given permission. It is easier when you've been given permission, but I give them permission as well to say, does this really make sense? I noticed that you accepted this meeting. You're supposed to be on vacation next week. Oh, it's just a staycation. No, but it's a vacation. Why do you need to be in the meeting? It's a conversation. We're not going to make a decision. Oh, we're not going to make a decision without you either. Which is really important, or you will be looped in appropriately. So again, I think it's another space where there's more opportunity, but leaders have to lead the way.
Absolutely.
So full disclosure, my mom was a preschool teacher, so there was no TV. I was like, everybody doesn't do workbooks over the summer. Your mom doesn't put a reading list on the fridge. Like everybody didn't have that. You guys didn't have, I thought everybody had that.
I did, Amy. My mother was a school teacher.
Okay.
I had summer programs.
Like all the
I
time.
did read books for pizza. Pizza Hut used to give out,
oh yes,
hands for a book if you read it. That was me. So that was the extent though. I was very full in the summertime.
So I'm in the zone of learning and education are always a constant. And here at Caleres, one of the really great parts about coming into an organization where there wasn't a person there before you is you get to create everything new and it looks cool, right? Like, let's have a website. That would be great. I was like, yes, other people have them. We will have one too, right? And like, just like that. I think so. I mean, that's like joyful, right? But we also get to figure out like how people are learning and retaining information. So we've tried a couple of drip things, like we put things on our Plaza, which is our internal page. We send out like a quarterly like diversity newsletter. I think out of all the things that we do around learning, almost everything I do is around learning, whether it's a new video that we've created, it's a teaching video, is that we try to make it fun. So we have book club. We have over 300 people in our book club. They've been series books. So you want to talk about race, caste, the sum of us. Right now we're reading What Happened to You. I have been asked to introduce a fiction book. I don't read fiction, so I've asked for some recommendations. I was like, fiction? Why would we read fiction? We have time. Let's read nonfiction, right? And so maybe the next book will be lighthearted, but it's really not about the book.
No,
It is about the community. It is about learning something new. And let me be clear, learning something new about ourselves and each other at the same time. So you don't have to read the book to come to book club. You just show up, right? But I think those are the ways in which people are in there during lunchtime. So you don't really have to take time because I know people have feelings about that, but it's every other week. It's only 1 hour. We read it in stages. So really try to make sure that learning opportunities come in bite size and come in different ways that people can retain and gather that information. It's not hitting you over the head. It's not necessarily a class, but you're kind of constantly learning. And I think I owe all that to my mother and great grandmother, who are both teachers. So.
Awesome. And so I think we've kind of already hit on this because it's like when you do all these things, I think that just encourages people, the camaraderie, the connection. When people are more connected, they tend to be better workers and better humans as a whole. And I think that just really speaks to how we can like really come together to support people and help encourage upskilling and reskilling yourself to make the best you. So I kind of want to think about, what does this look like in action? So when a woman, for example, completes a degree and does additional training courses or obtains a new professional certification, how can she leverage those things with her employer? Like, how can she, after she's done the work, how do you take the work and present it to your leader? And what does that look like?
well, I think where you start, and if I was talking to an up and coming leader, I would say first you take your leader on the journey with you, right? This goes back to the transparency piece, right? I'm in a program, I'm going into a program, engaging with them, bringing them into that space, right? That's the building relationship piece. It's also showing the investment. Also, you may get some unsolicited mentorship that way as well, but it's likewise giving your leader permission. I think also being clear about what it is that you did learn at the milestones in which you learn them with your leader or a trusted leader in the organization who can advocate for you, but not because they can. I think it's because it's part of the learning piece. I think also, what it looks like is knowing what you're going to do with it. As a leader, if I have someone who's going into a program, I want them to think about those things going into it. If I'm talking to someone who's in the program and they're looking at how do I broker the conversation upward to a leader, it's bringing them into the conversation and putting into place the active listening and learning that you will experience by bringing your leaders into it with you. You're invested, but if they're invested with you, it goes a long way as well. I think that's step one.
Noni, I love what you said about bringing the leader with you. I have someone on my team who's a new manager, and was like, all right, what do I need to do here, to be a great manager, and I just even basic skills. And so we came up with a plan, and I said, listen, part of it is you're going to meet with me every week, and we're going to talk, and I'm going to model behavior and whatever. We're going to talk about the difficulties and the positives. And she said, okay. And she said, I heard something called masterclass. And I said, great. And so she signed up for masterclass and found some inspiring people to to listen to. And every week when we have our touch base, anytime she's listened to a masterclass, she'll be like, I have to tell you about what I heard in my masterclass today. And we talk about it together, and she's teaching me, and that in itself, I'm like, wow, like you came to me on how I can help you be a better manager, but you're teaching me right now too. And so when we do learn skills, I think you have to use it, right? Like you have to use it and practice it. And it's not just, yeah, I took this class, let me write a paper about it and tell you about it. No, show me. So I think that's a way to leverage what they've learned as well, is by showing.
Yes.
I love what both of you all said. I could hear you talk all day, quite honestly, both Lyndsey and Noni and Ashley, like all day. I could just sit and answer that question, right? I think what I heard over and over again, though, is taking people with you. And I think, as women in particular, many of us get messages around doing this on our own. And that could not be that's like the biggest lie ever. Everyone's successful, God help. Everybody's successful. Somewhere along the way, somebody helped them along the way. And so I think, asking for help is, maybe we could pivot this notion of it being a moment of weakness and really a moment of being good at utilizing the resources that are around you. Right. And that, the person, your manager, I love Noni saying, take them with you. Like, I know I was afraid to tell my boss that I was working on my PhD, mostly because I was afraid I wouldn't finish it. Right. I was like, well, I don't want to tell you because, just in case this doesn't work out, I didn't let you down. Right. And like, how do we allow the vulnerability to say like, hey, I normally work 12 hours, but now I'm taking classes again. And so I can't work 12 hours, I'll come in super, super early and I'll log on after class, but I have to leave at 4:30 to get there by 5, right? For this period of time. I think it speaks to our level of vulnerability, but also our desire to be connected to other people and have them cheering for us along the way. And, kind of the power of telling somebody what you want to do, to Lyndsey's point, is that other person is not just holding you accountable, I think, in that way, but also cheering for you. Like, tell me what you learned. Tell me what you know. And it's what an easier conversation it has when I'm trying to talk to another manager about you, right? Now I know she's good people, right? I put my name and stake my reputation behind this individual because I'm close enough to them to know them. And I just think, when we can push past our fears of like the closeness that we desire, but also that we want to have in the workplace, I just think so many other things flow. And I don't think we say like, we're in corporate America, so we don't get to talk about what we're scared about or what we're afraid of. But if we were, I think it would also make us respond to each other in a much more loving way, in a much more supportive way than maybe even it appears that we need. And so I would just offer like, it could be radically different and we could make it so, we just had to say yes.
I love that. Just having to say yes. And I think we spoke a little bit about the vulnerabilities of sometimes why we don't put it out there or why we don't do the ask, whether it's for lack of there being opportunity or personal hurdles that may prevent us from taking the next step. But just thinking about it as a whole, what do you think the biggest hurdle for women who want to build their skills in advance are? We've had previous conversations about our names not being in the hat when those conversations are happening in other rooms. So is the hurdle our names not being in the conversations when we're not there? Is it no one's having those sidebar conversations with us? Or is it just what happens on a day-to-day as women, as mothers? We get so sidetracked with what happens outside of work and life that tends to overshadow our careers. So just kind of want to hear you all's thoughts about what some of those hurdles may look like, or even if you have some thoughts around what potential solutions look like for that as well.
I think when you talk about what is the challenge for us, I think the first thing is we don't think we're enough. I think in the workplace that is the biggest challenge. And I think we think we're not enough because we have perfected the multitasking of balancing all the other things that I'm not going to say our male counterparts don't do, they just don't let on to doing them. So we have traditionally in times past made it public. Oh my God, I got to get the kids. Oh my God, I got to make the brownies. Oh, I got to, now listen, we want to do those things, but we have compared ourselves up against the male counterpart who we assumed wasn't doing them. I've come to learn in years that they're doing them. They're doing those things too, maybe not all of them. They just don't speak to them, right? So I think that we think we're not enough, which is why we don't go for the roles and positions and things that we want, desire, and even made up, right? But I think the other thing is that we don't give ourselves enough permission, but I think it's changing, right? So as we diversify and as we are infusing the leadership ranks with women, we don't have to have the hour-long conversation because we know what that means. We know what the rush out the door means. We know what the Monday morning quarterbacking looks like and what it means. And so I think that diversity is allowing us to have a better conversation. But I'll say, like I said before, as those of us who are already leaders in that space, we have to make sure we stay true to it. We know what the challenges are. We're talking to them. So how do we liberate the up and coming female leader who may be feeling challenged at that stage in their career? I'm a mom of 3. My 2 youngest ones were 14. Well, they are 14 months apart. No one told me. No one told. 2 different formulas at the same time and diapers and pull-ups at the same time. And for the love of Jesus, why is back to school night like 45 minutes apart? We got to come. Both kids are here and I can't bring them, but I can't leave them that long. And why is back to school night on a weeknight? Why is the Super Bowl on a Sunday? Why? Right? Just things that we can say out loud now that we never said before, but we always asked, we're going to entertain when the Super Bowl comes on, but who's putting the kids to bed? Oh, because the Super Bowl was on, we're going to put the kids to bed. Well, now we're entering the conversation and we're letting them know we watch sports too. No, I'm gonna be at the Super Bowl game. As a matter of fact, I'm going. Okay. So, it is playoff weekend and I want to see the game too. It's that. So I think that these challenges were very real, but I do think the tide is changing because of diversity, which is totally Amy and Ashley, your space, like that. It had to happen to normalize the things, Lyndsey, that you're talking about. Those are real. You're not doing those things because you feel like you have to. You're doing them because you want to. It's just that there's not enough hours in the day. So where do you make the sacrifice? And typically it's in the space of rest, right? Which is the wrong space. So we have to normalize it. We have to make it not a stigma.
I love that.
I remember worrying about all the career things I was going to miss while I was raising my kids. I can't think of one right now. Yeah, although I've raised 4 beautiful, brilliant young people, like that's my joy, right? But when I think about like, did I miss a trip? Did I miss a job? Like, I actually can't remember if that were so anymore, because what's important is, now I have flexibility and I've said empty nesting is like being a teenager with money. It's quite lovely. My best life. Oh my goodness. These have been the best years so far. Yeah. But when I remember worrying about it, I remember watching my single friends with no kids move up that corporate ladder so fast because they could. And here I was a mom, right? And now we're at the same place. And I wish I would have known then what I know now. It's like, you don't miss anything. Life is just a trade. Like you're just switching places. You're the same person you were. Maybe you're different. I'm probably different than I was at 20 something, but like a better person than I was then, right? Good for then. This is good for now. But I can't even recall. I remember at the time, like, oh, I can't travel out of town or I can't relocate because my kids are in school. And now I can't even call one of those companies up anymore. Or I kind of remember it happening, but like, I don't remember any of that. And so I wish if there were a hurdle, I think it is feeling like we have to be all the things all the time at the same time. And what I would say is pick something you want to be really good at in this moment and maybe just today and do it.
And that's so like just today. just
today.
today. And, it's, Lyndsey, I mean, I think I was a single mom for 7 years. I think you pat yourself on the back, because I think the beauty of it is when you have someone who comes in your office or in your space and they're struggling with it, but they don't say it, but you can see it and you know what it is, and you can liberate them. Because we didn't come up in the era where they were going to liberate us because we weren't going to tell it. I can't tell you the prayers I prayed hoping I wasn't late getting to the daycare. Like, you're running, and praying that the cop doesn't stop you, because it's like, I'm not stopping. I'm going straight to daycare. You'll meet me at the daycare, or wishing that the train doesn't stop at the stops that it stops at every single day when you come home from work, because you're trying to we've all done it, right? You just don't talk about it. And, when you get into work and you finally get to your desk or your office and no one knows, it's the half a day's work is already going into the day, just making sure the kids have landed. But Lyndsey, give yourself permission, because like Amy said, you're going to look back and you won't remember. And you know what? They're privileged to have you as you navigate through all of that in the season that you navigated, because only you will be able to empower the next female leader.
And I love that. That is beautiful. And just to round this out before we answer a couple of questions from the audience, what do women bring to the workplace? We've already spoke to how we can support each other, and it's by seeing us and being able to see them in ourselves as leaders and be able to inspire the next leader or show relatability to the next leader. But it's, what do women bring to the workplace?
Well, as the shopper, I think we all are, right? Like it just kind of happens that way. But I mean, we make up almost like 90% of the consumer base. We represent the family. When we go out on a Saturday or a Sunday, you're out on the weekends, she's out there doing everything for everyone else in the household ordinarily, right? I think we bring perspective, we bring diversity of thought, we bring the view, whether you're talking about from a leadership perspective or you're talking about from a consumer perspective, right? When we walk into a store, we're looking at how we can make that purchase for every member of our family, not just one, and usually not just ourselves, right? So I think we bring that level of perspective and diversity of thought, just generally speaking. That's why they need us. So you talk about in the sales place. Yes, if you have a female leader, she is going to think about every single thing, how to hang it up, which way you should position it, why this shoe should be a little lower and not higher, and all of those different things. But the diversity, the perspective, because we are traditionally the ones who were your avid consumer anyway. So from a sales perspective, I think that's key.
I love that. And to Lyndsey and Amy, I will pose it to you all, either way, consumer or leader or just employee as a whole. What do we bring to the footwear industry, especially and the workplace?
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. I think my two favorite words came to mind almost immediately when you said that. And my two favorite words are liberation and joy. Yeah. So like the ability to like freely be anything, right? I have no style. I'm not a fashion person. So every day I come and look a little different, sometimes it's super conservative, sometimes it's a little hippy dippy, I'm like, why choose? I don't have to have a look. I could be a different look every day. Like that's joyful, right? But I also think like the joy comes from like creating something we've never seen. So when I think about one of my favorite designers here, Angelique Joseph, who designs our shoes for Naturalizer. And I'm always in awe of like, she just made a new shoe and it's got a difference. I mean, I'm like, when did you think of this? And it's beautiful. It's like the dopest of dope. I would have never, like, what are we using purple? Can I wear a purple? Does that have fur on it? Like just the endless, boundless amounts of joy that come in this industry. And I'm so grateful and thankful for all the creative people, because, we have to reimagine the world all the time. And that brings me joy, but it also brings liberation. And I think we've all had a taste of what it means to be free or feels to be free. And so knowing that women are in the workplace and have that, maybe we don't have the words to say those things in particular, but we know what it feels like when it happens. And that's everything. So we definitely need us here.
Yes. And Lyndsey, before we go to the audience, I would love to.
I would say we are, we're hardworking and we could multitask and we get things done and we do it with compassion. And compassion and understanding, I think, is key. And we have it.
I love it. So we do have a question from the audience. This is from Karen, and she asked, what up and coming technologies stand out, such as 3D printing or Web3, and how important is it that senior creatives have working knowledge of these technologies? Any thoughts?
I'm thinking of the new technology in cyberspace, I don't know the right name for it. Somebody help me out. Metatronics, is that what it's called? The meta universe. So again, wasn't raised with television, so I'm a little awkward in this moment, but I have noticed my children are buying items online in their video games. So I think, wow, that's cool. Like you can buy a Nike, shoe or whatever. So I'm excited. I'm sure we'll enter that space too. And just thinking in that virtual world, like something I would never have thought about before, but being a consumer for real money, buying virtual things with real money. What a cool moment. And so when I think about technology, I think about the way that it's also expanded, not just like our e-commerce and our ability to buy things online, right, since COVID, but also like, what does this look like? What does the aperture look like when we think about what's to come as it relates to technology? I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know at ASICS, we 3D printed some slide-in sandals. And I think too, just from a senior leader perspective, I just think we've been speaking about being a continuous learner. And I think even Lyndsey, you may have said this in a previous conversation that we've had, is just always making sure that we're staying ahead of the game and being on the lookout for the next best thing. And as leaders, we always need to have our ears to the streets for the next big opportunity. But then that is also where you look to your employees to see what they know. I think that each generation brings something different, and just that diversity of thought, having different people be able to bring and share perspectives, I think really helps to continue the industry to grow and change. And if we aren't continuing to upskill and reskill ourselves in this space, I think we'll also be at a disadvantage to our employees to not know what's happening next. But any other thoughts on that? Because we do have a couple more questions that I see. All right, well, Barbara from New York asks, how can women ask for what they need to take advantage of training opportunities? Everyone encourages professional development, but there's no time for it.
I think one of you said, I don't know who it was, you said, you just got to ask. So that's it. You just got to ask.
The worst thing they can say is no, right?
Right, exactly. Right. So you have to ask.
Yeah.
I'm also really keen about like looking at the continuing ed things that are free at the universities. Now they're online because of COVID, so much more accessible for everybody in lots of different spaces. But kind of to Noni's point, like my development is my job. That's my role. That's my, what I do for me. And so I would just encourage, if we're waiting for employers to give us all the skills that we need, we're probably going to keep waiting. And so, that podcast that Lyndsey's listening to, that's her development. That she's learning something new every single day when she's coming into work, or getting a skill or a tip or technique. And so I would really encourage us to not make work the only place where we think we can get or gain information. The world is filled with information. And so I would just really encourage us to, take a course I took a course in like aeronautics, and although I didn't think I would learn anything, I learned a lot. And a lot of it had very diverse parts and chemicals. And I was like, oh, this is cool. It's just like diversity. Like we need a lot of different things to make this work. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then I got like all geeked about airplanes. So just thinking about like, you think it may not apply, but there's so many gifts out here for us to have if we could just see them and take those opportunities when they come, or search them out if they're not readily available.
Yeah, and I think, everything that was said here, I think that it's really important to understand that it won't be without sacrifice. It's your own sacrifice, but it won't be without sacrifice. So it does take the time to sit down, think about, write what, like Lyndsey said, chart your course. Even Amy, like you said, if you're going to just ask, you have to do the research to even know what you're asking for. That takes sacrifice, right? And then whatever it is that's granted to you, whether it's the company, whether you sign up for a class and you pay for it, that's going to take sacrifice. So it still won't be without sacrifice. It might look different. You might not have to stay up all night like I did because we didn't multitask at work. We just worked. Maybe you have better permission from a leader than I had 15 years ago working on a degree. But nonetheless, you still will have to make sacrifice. And so I think you have to be prepared for that as well.
I love that. And we have one final question from Diana in Boston. And she asks, how would you advise a woman who is ready to take the next step in her career and wants to create an action plan for herself? And her question is, how do I do that?
Lyndsey's going to say, just do it. No. Listen, I mean, I think it's a fair question. I don't know that it's the how so much maybe that they're getting after, but it's the what does an action plan look like? Your next is your next. It is about what is it? And what you need to get there are the gaps. So now you have to be true to yourself, identify the gaps, and then figure out how you're going to solve for the gaps, right? What is needed to solve for the gaps? What is needed might be a class that you pay for. It might be a class your employer pays for. It might be a class they pay half for. You might be on the hook for it if they don't have this fabulous program that Amy has. You might have to take risk. We have internship programs, internal internship programs. And I talk to interns all the time who say, I really want to, but that means they have to come off of the job they're on today and take a risk, a calculated risk. Perhaps trust the company, trust the leader. That role might not be there. Take that risk, go forward, be fully invested. Again, not without sacrifice, not without a little bit of fear. I think, Amy, you talked about a little bit early. Do it scared. Just do it. Just do it. Because if it's your plan, it's gonna haunt you a little bit until you take the leap. So you have to take the leap, trust yourself, and have courage. And everything else that's been said here today, reach out for those who have already done it or you perceive have already done it, and see what kind of feedback you can get.
I love that. Any other ideas on how we can equip them for the journey?
I would tell somebody, like, tell your boss, if you trust your boss. If you don't, tell somebody who might hire you. But I would definitely tell somebody. I think, sometimes the ways in which, if I think about like young people, young women in particular, get a lot of messages like this is going to happen by magic. And there's no magic coming, like nobody's coming. Like, so if it's what you want, like sometimes you have to speak that into existence. I write a lot of my goals down and put them on the fridge. All of them have happened, right? And it wasn't magic. My intentions were there. My thoughts were there. When I talked to other people, I was talking to them about it. Even the things that I wasn't sure about, like maybe should I leave my company? Like I put on the fridge, find a new opportunity. Opportunity didn't mean outside of my organization necessarily, but once I wrote it down, like I'm sure my whole spirit was like, hey, what's available? What's new? What's going on? Listening hard for other opportunities. And that's sometimes how those things, but you have to tell somebody. Nobody knows what you're thinking on the inside. And sometimes, we're too afraid to say it out loud. Sometimes we're too afraid to say it out loud because it might actually happen. And so I would say, also be ready just in case it happens, and be ready to move. Don't let your fear, your negative self-talk hold you back from that next great opportunity. Take it, raise your hand.
And I love what you said at the beginning too, is if you're already getting ready when the next opportunity happens, or when it's time to chart that course, you don't have to spend the time figuring it out, because you've already equipped yourself along the way so that you can be fully prepared to walk into it. And so I love that. And Lyndsey, I do want to give you a last moment to speak if you had any thoughts on what the course should look like for someone before we close out today.
I would just say, anyone in my organization, my door's open, right? So, find someone that you can talk to. For me, come sit with me. I'm more than happy to sit and talk to someone. And I hope that, everyone listening today can maybe, find someone in their organization that they can do that with, or a friend, anybody. But I think, that really helps when you talk it through with someone.
That's right. Call us.
Call us.
Call us.
Send us a message.
We are
Send
all
us a
here.
message. But don't be afraid to knock on the door, right, Lyndsey? Like, I remember young in my career, I did it, and I was like, I like her, but she's like 3 levels higher. I'm curious. I rode up in the elevator with her today, and one day I just closed my eyes. This was when there was no texting, folks. I did a little sticky and slid it up under the door and prayed that she didn't step on it, and it was on the bottom of her shoe and she didn't know it. And it was a relationship that turned into a 25-year mentorship relationship. See, sometimes you have to take risk. Like, just close your eyes and just do it. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? They tell you no.
And that's it. And so again, ladies, Noni, Lyndsey, Amy, thank you all so much for having this discussion with me today. I think it's been a true joy and pleasure to be able to hear perspectives from you through your journeys and as leaders in this industry, and to the women that are spending the time listening to this call, and even the men that are on this call that can have heard everything that has happened today. I think we spoke a lot to connecting, vulnerability, courage, fear, having your tribe or having your people, and just sharing out loud. I think that these are all great ways in which you can empower yourself to upskill or reskill yourself for that next big, wonderful, or what you're going to be when you grow up. So again, thank you all today for so much insight, and have a great rest of your day.